Hey folks, welcome back to another installment of Inspiral Gaming Weekly. I'm Daniel, and I'm here with Robert Hodge to discuss some more of the servants that will be playable in Dimension Door. Last week we talked about servants in general, as well as a bit of a focus on one in particular, the Raven's Visage. Can you tell us who we'll be talking about this week, Robert?
Yeah, the two servants that we'll be discussing are the Gorgon, which we showed a while back, and the Blade Sentinel, which we posted on Monday.
Okay, cool. With a name like the Gorgon, you must be drawing inspiration from Greek mythology, right? Um, so is it safe to assume that we're dealing with a Medusa-esque creature here?
Yeah, the emphasis on Medusa-esque, the esque portion. Yeah, in terms of looks, the Gorgon is pretty much Medusa, in the most traditional sense, but she functions a little bit differently in game. Particularly the stone gaze is different.
Okay. So what's different about the stone gaze in Dimension Door?
So because our game is a turn-based like board game in a computer, there's no actual facing direction, so we have no way to determine if you're looking at her or not. Rather, you're just in her room or you're not. So she actually functions with panicking. So instead of turning to stone, you slowly go more and more insane. You get more anxious and just start panicking, which is a status effect in the game.
Okay, well, I guess that obviously leads into what exactly is panicking.
So, panicked is a status effect that forces you to move away from the source of panic. For example, the Gorgon. Whenever you fail a dread check against the Gorgon, you actually become panicked. So, panicked, the forced movement is you gotta move at least a space away from the Gorgon or whatever the source is before you can perform any other actions on your turn. Which, in fact, depending on when it happens, may cause you to end your turn just running away.
Well, this isn't even really related to the topic of servants in general, but since you mentioned it, how big are the rooms in Dimension Door?
So each room is a 3x3 grid. There's 3x3 spaces, 9 spaces. And there are, again, the 3x3 is a common theme. You've got 9 rooms in the mansion itself. So you've got a 9x9 grid system of movement in its entirety. Though it's infinite because you can kind of go off the edge and into the other one, if that makes any sense. It's spherical.
Okay. Um, so basically, if you're trapped in a room with one of these, like the Gorgon, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of cramped in there with a panic effect throwing you around or making you run away.
Right. So even though you're panicked, though, you can run through doors. But remember, the movement, you have to be moving what's considered away from the Gorgon. So if there's only one door in the room and she's at the entrance and you're panicked, you're huddling against the wall. You're crying for your life and you can't do anything about it. So you don't want to get yourself into those kinds of situations.
Oh, well, I'm always in those kinds of situations. All right, so more importantly, how does the Gorgon win?
So the Gorgon wins when she kills a panicked guest. She has to be the one to deal the killing blow. And her kit helps her do that in many different ways. She plays a lot with the panic mechanic. So one of her actions, she can cause panicked people to become slowed, which actually lowers the amount of movement, total spaces you can move each turn. Which means if it's too low, you may not be able to get out of the panicked status simply by moving the minimum number of spaces away. Another thing is she can force guests in a room to make a dread check, which may cause them to become panicked. So she's got a lot of these like AoE actions to do these things. On top of it, any guest that has failed her dread checks, she can mark one of them as like a target in a sense, but only she knows who she marked. Whenever she attacks that target, she deals more damage to it. So all of this revolves around panicked and helps her kill a panicked guest. And when she does that, all she has to do is, help the mansion win by killing the other guests, or just letting them die one way or another.
Okay, I'm seeing a sort of pattern here. Are most of the servants tied to some sort of status effect?
So I can't quantify it, but yeah, probably around half of them are tied to some kind of status effect one way or another. Um, and that's actually a common theme throughout the game. A lot of servants and prime beings in the story are a physical manifestation of some kind of negative trait or status effect in this case.
Okay. All right, now that we've dedicated some time to the Gorgon, I think it's time to go on to the next servant. This week, our artwork showcase revealed the Blade Sentinel. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So the Blade Sentinel is essentially living armor. It's this telekinetic hive mind that has controlled blades and basically made it a living being.
Okay, so then what is unique about playing as the Blade Sentinel? Is it like the Gorgon and the Raven's Visage, where it has a status effect tied into it?
No, actually, it's very different than all of the servants. So when you die and you become the Blade Sentinel, you actually are prompted with a menu, and you have to choose another living guest. Now, of course, as a servant, you'll know that, which ones are living and which ones aren't at this point. So you choose one, and the choice that you make, that guest, you have to protect. So instead of the Gorgon and the Raven's Visage, which is kill, 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 the Blade Sentinel is kind of kill, kill, kill. Oh, but you're my friend. I'm protecting you. In fact, your win condition as the Blade Sentinel is that person has to survive. If that person is the last man or woman standing, or if they've completed their hidden agenda, you win with them.
Okay. Does it let the player know that you're their ally?
No, actually, it's hidden information, so that's where the Blade Sentinel can kind of bluff. Now, servants can't really communicate with the guests necessarily, currently undetermined, but that's where you can bluff as the Blade Sentinel. You can act like you're protecting this person and then just backstab them when it's safe, when they think they're the most safe. That being said, I'm sure people might ask the question, well, what happens if your person dies? Are you just not allowed to win anymore? So, no, actually, when your person dies, you have to then be the person or the servant who kills the last living guest. So okay. you essentially are trying to prevent everyone except one person from winning. And if that person dies, the person you're trying to protect, you kind of just lash out on everyone.
Okay, so other than protecting a specific guest, does the Blade Sentinel have any other powers?
Yeah, so the Blade Sentinel can actually hold melee weapons. So it's this blade thing that can hold a blade. It's pretty cool. It also deals extra damage. Guests and servants normally only deal 1 damage on their basic attacks. Because the Blade Sentinel can hold a weapon, it can do extra damage. But on top of that, its base damage, if it, let's say, didn't have a weapon, is actually equal to its strength. So it can deal a lot of damage in a single strike. On top of that, it's actually strong against guns and melee weapons that are not artifacts. So those non-artifact weapons deal less damage to it. And lastly, if you fail your dread check against a Blade Sentinel, it can choose if it wants to attack you right then and there. When you fail it, it moves to your space and attacks you. If it wants to. It can say, no, I'm good. And use that as a bluff, maybe. But it can only do it to 1 guest per round.
That's an interesting mechanic. Does it matter if a servant is dead, or at least, respawning for a turn when the game ends? Does it affect their victory at all?
It depends entirely on the very unique servant. So the ones that we've discussed, no. They can be dead when the game ends, as long as they fulfilled their condition. But that may not be true for other servants.
Okay. But I'm assuming if it did matter, it would say something like in their win condition, it would say like be alive when the game ends or something like that.
Yeah, I would be worded that way. Or, for example, when they respawn, there might be a penalty to respawning, which could be lowering their, let's make an arbitrary servant here. Let's say you need a certain number of these tokens or whatever, these things, and you lose them upon death. That's a possibility.
All right. And then I wanted to ask you this for a while now, but this seems like a good time. With the dead players reviving as servants and servants being somewhat immortal, how do you stop the game from being stacked heavily against the living players?
So, I don't want this game to drag on too long. The servants are there for two purposes. To get revenge, because it feels great, and the other purpose is to actually make the game faster. So it's supposed to be chaotic. You enter this mansion, which is just totally insane, and it's got all these things stacked against you, though you'll find a lot of things that are very helpful. So it makes it very valuable not to die. And if you do die, or if someone else dies, it's supposed to be heavily stacked against those living players, making it harder for them to fulfill the win condition, whether it's their own hidden agenda or the overarching scenario. That being said, if a character dies, it might be because another character killed them, and that may end the game right away because they won their hidden agenda.
Okay. So it seems like the servants serve as a mechanic to kind of not only move the game along, like you mentioned, but also keep players honest with each other. Like if you kill somebody, they're going to come back as a servant, so might as well work together for now until you get closer at least.
Exactly. It's to incentivize this pseudo teamwork, this kind of, you gotta be extra careful about what you say and do, or else someone might take it the wrong way and kill you. But if they do that, yeah, it can turn ugly. It can get, really bad. If I kill you, for example, and you turn to a servant and come back and you kill me, and you might win for that. But yeah, it is an acceleration mechanic as well.
Okay. Well, I guess I will not just kill people randomly then. I also wanted to ask you about the quote that you put in the Blade Sentinel's reveal. You mentioned something about Sarah the Endless Stag, which I believe we've mentioned is one of the prime beings. Can you elaborate on the relationship between Sarah and the Sentinel?
Yeah, so the Blade Sentinel, like all of the servants, are one way or another serving prime beings. Unfortunately for Sarah, the Sentinel isn't serving her, she's serving someone else, some other prime being. That fact I'm actually going to leave for the readers of Lysander's journal. And that's where you'll learn kind of about Sarah the Endless Stag and how this mansion, involves her.
All right, well, I guess that kind of covers everything I wanted to in this episode, so we'll draw this episode to a close. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week. I guess I've been Daniel?
I've been noticing a little trend here, Daniel. Or Daniel? You've been going a little bit more and more insane as this goes along. You okay there, buddy?
No comment.